Hi, everybody. I'm Joshua Sear. I'm the Senior Director of Startup Initiatives at the New Hampshire Tech Alliance, and I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation about startups today. And to get us started, I'm going to turn to Jason here and ask him to tell us a little bit about himself and the startup he's running here in New Hampshire.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Jason Walker. I'm co-founder and CEO of Waypoint Robotics. And Waypoint is focused on making robots for the people who are in factories right now, making a robot that they can use. So easy to use that you can use the people you have. And we think that's going to make a tremendous impact on the viability and profitability of small to mid-sized enterprises and help the workforce at the same time.
Great. Carla.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Vanderhoof. I am the co-founder and chief design officer of Addapptation. And Addapptation is a low-code UX platform for Salesforce.com and other CRMs. Essentially, we help people build apps really quickly to help their customers, their employees, do their jobs better, and we create a window into their data that's meaningful to them. We can also connect multiple data sources to create that one view into your business.
Awesome. Thanks. Mark.
Thanks, Joshua. Mark Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of miEdge. We're actually an older startup founded back in 2012. We're a data company focused on providing data and analytics to the insurance industry. We've grown, quite aggressively over the last, 8 years or so. We have about 40 employees now in New Hampshire, and just grown very nicely through this time.
Excellent. Thanks. Well, speaking of growing, we all know that growing a startup has a lot of challenges. And what I'd like to know from you is, how have you been able to tackle some of them? And Jason, maybe you can kick off there.
Yeah. Gosh, which challenge to pick? I think
the most interesting or the hardest? How about that?
I think the hardest thing really has just been knowing when to cut bait on things. And in our industry, there's an extremely long sales cycle, and that can be a challenge. When you're growing in terms of people and facilities, those things can have a long timeline, and the impact of guessing wrong on scheduling can be really big. So if, in our case, when we were moving to our new facility, the schedule kept getting pushed back on our move-in date, and I had planned the move-in date on a very specific time frame because of all the things were going to come after that, and all of my fears came true. So, cutting bait on that a lot faster would have been really helpful to us.
Great. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the growth that you've been seeing since you've been in that facility.
Yeah, it's funny, from a facilities standpoint, somehow people just fill available space instantaneously, It's been possible to, before the pandemic, host visitors and have a beautiful facility that's painted in our colors and has sunlight and air conditioning and things like that instead of the windowless warehouse we started in. And having access to space like that at a price that is way more reasonable than it would be in Boston, and yet still having access to a lot of the community resources of Boston has been great.
Super. All right. Carla, how about growth at Addapptation?
Sure. And I share the story of the late move-in date with the new space. We bought a space, tore it down to the studs, and I had promised everybody to be in there. You would be in there by we'll be in there by Thanksgiving. By Christmas. January 1, I promise. Yeah, it took a little extra longer for us too. So you're not alone with that story. It was interesting because we got in and had to send people home, but we've continued to grow. So we're almost 20 people now. And last year we were just under 10. I believe we were 9. So we've had great growth over the past year. And I can't wait to get back into the space so we can fill it again.
Awesome. And Mark, how about growing miEdge?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that kind of you have to really kind of balance is kind of the cart before the horse kind of concept, right? Is you're really kind of investing in the business, but you don't want to outrun yourself, and then you don't want to get yourself into financial issues, and so a lot of balancing of financial discipline, but investing in growth, and then when to take capital, when not to take capital, finding the right partners versus not having any partners. So I think you just got to feel your way through that and know that if you truly just focus on finding a really disciplined delivery of your product to your customer, don't R&D yourself to death. And that's one thing that I think maybe all of us can sympathize with, is sometimes you try and make things too perfect. Get a viable product in the marketplace as quickly as possible, and then just continually innovate from there.
Great. Well, you had mentioned, when to seek investment, when not, and using that in cash flow. And I know you were one of the first recipients of the Tech Out investment. It was one of the New Hampshire Tech Alliance programs. Was that good timing for you? What did that enable you to do at miEdge?
Yeah, it was huge for us. And it was a combination of why it was huge. It wasn't just the money component, but it was also really the whole ecosystem of tech entrepreneurs in New Hampshire that really kind of played an important component in helping us, both from a device perspective, from a resource perspective. But yeah, it was really 6 months after we went V1 product launch that we got that investment, and so that really helped to stabilize our capital structure, and it's been no looking back since.
Great. And anybody else have any, are we going through an investment round right now? We just received investments. You want to talk about it, Carla?
Yeah. So we closed our seed round literally one day before the stay-home order. Oh. So that was another thing. We moved into our office, we got funding, we had a big celebration, and then pandemic hit. So we could not have had better possible timing with that. And it's given us a lot of comfort to pivot as we need to during these times. Fortunately, unfortunately, one of the main growth channels for us and for Salesforce is in-person events. Everyone knows of their huge Dreamforce event. So a lot of that funding we had taken in preparation for growth around those events, and so we're like, we're just gonna put that in a nice little box there. So when that time arises again. But we've been very fortunate with fundraising and also our customers, and growing through that as well.
Great. And I know not all startups need to go through a fundraising round, or you have to do it when it's appropriate for them. And Jason, I think your business was uniquely suited to be able to fund through cash flow and growing the businesses. And can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I would say we built it uniquely to be able to do that. My last company was venture-backed. Everybody that we're battling against in the marketplace is venture-backed in a huge way. And we made the choice to be self-funded, to take in private funding and complement that with the profits we make of selling robots, understanding that there would come a point when we would need to find a really good strategic partner. And we're about to get to that point. One of the reasons we wanted to grow the company that way is that when you do VC, it feels like 80% of your time is consumed with fundraising. And we really wanted to focus a lot more on the product and on the customers, and making sure that those two things really matched, that we were developing something the world wanted. And I think the tremendous progress we've made is due in large part to that strategy. But there's also a point when having a great strategic partner or a big pile of money can be really handy. So we've really tried to create as much value as we can before we invite in somebody else who might get some equity. But it's definitely a tightrope that everybody has to walk in one way or another.
Sure. Great. Well, part of that is just what we learn during the startup journey, right? And when we're building a startup, we're always learning about the business, about the market, about everything. So, Mark, maybe Can you tell us a bit about one thing and one lesson in particular that you learned when building your startup?
Yeah, I think, for us, and for most people, you kind of want to go big and make a splash and kind of, get the biggest clients you can and things like that. For us, I think one of the key early things that we wanted to make sure we did was to get the product right and to get the capability of the company right. Because as you scale, you put certain things in, and so if you're trying to go after big companies with procurement and technical issues that you need to validate yourself as a company. So what we decided to do was really stay small, focus on the small and mid-sized customer in our ecosystem. And then that allowed us to generate a lot of free cash flow to build the infrastructure of the business. And then from there, then we could start to hit some of the larger accounts, which is what ended up happening.
Great. I know that going after that one big sale, is a big swing and can burn a lot of time and money. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Carla, you got a similar story?
Oh, well, I mean, I definitely hear that one. I was going to say a couple things you've said resonate with me. Number one, the perfect never ships.
Yeah.
That you can wait forever to make sure like every line is painted. And this is coming from the chief design officer,
Yes, right.
who might have a little tendency to want things perfect before they go out the door. So, but it really is important to get things out there and to focus on feedback, because that's the only way ultimately to get to perfect. Absolutely. Is to get your customers talking to you, understand what they love, understand what their challenges are. So those feedback loops, and to set yourself up in a way that you can iterate quickly, and making sure that your technology is there to support that. Because, if you have those long cycles, those can be death sentences, whether it's, long sales cycles looking for that big whale, or whether it's just taking forever to deliver on something. So I'd say, the perfect never ships, but always be listening for feedback.
Great. How about you?
We just had in the robotics industry, there was kind of a little shockwave that went through the community, which Walmart and a company called Bossa Nova had a relationship, and at the beginning of the year they announced they were expanding it, and then in the last couple of weeks they announced they were dissolving it. So, and that robotics company instantly had to lay off half their workforce, and obviously that was just incredibly disruptive, like start over disruptive. And one of the reasons we built our company the way we did is so that we could make sure everything was scalable to begin with. If you're growing based on your own progress, and you can start with small to mid-sized enterprises, and before you become that dog who catches the car it's chasing and you're stuck on the bumper of a speeding vehicle, if everything is built in a way that scales naturally because of the way it's built, then it feels like it's a lot easier when you do snag a big fish to actually land it and be able to take care of them. Because if you fail with a big fish, you fail spectacularly, and it's very, very hard to come back from.
Oh, I was going to say, and even if you succeed, then competitors are going to know you're there too, right? So as a startup, once you're exposed, you better have the legs to outrun your competitors. So it's another.
You also create a little franchise value as well, because some of these big firms automatically assume that they can do business with you, whereas the smaller and mid-sized firms, if you focus on them to start with, and then the news starts to spread in that marketplace, and then some of the bigger firms are asking, well, why aren't you? And so you create some franchise value, and it puts you in a good position when you do come to negotiate terms.
Great. Well, Jason, I was thinking from your anecdote, I think we've all seen either a video or a cartoon of somebody reeling in the big fish and then getting pulled in to the water afterwards, right? And sort of the opposite intent, right? So that makes me think about things that you wish you did differently, right? And there's probably well, for Mark, there's none because he did everything perfect, right? But like, is there anything you did when you're starting your company, and if you had to do it over again, you'd take a different path, or you'd take a different approach, or maybe go fundraise later, or go to talk to a different market segment first, or do we have any anecdotes along those lines? And Carla, how about you?
That's a really tough one. Because with every moment, we make decisions based on the knowledge of our current moment, right? So when I look back, we've always had a lot of intent and thoughtfulness, and sure, we've had some mishires, or we've trusted people and it was like, we thought that could happen and it didn't. Or maybe we've spent a little too much time on either a customer or a product or, any decision that fell through. But in the startup world, everything is a learning moment. So, I mean, if you kind of lead with that growth mindset and you're gonna make mistakes. So as far as missteps, I think it's just missteps are part of the game.
Sure.
And it's part of the learning. So I don't think I have any regrets, because everything that we've done has brought us to where we are, and now the knowledge that we hold is so valuable. And I'm sure I'll have more of that in the future. But it's hard to say regrets.
And a growth mindset is my kids are learning this. Well, I love that the next generation is already understanding this at their core in kindergarten, right?
Yes.
Like how things are going to be so different as they get older. But also, this may not be your final venture. Right. And as we learn, we are going to adapt that and do that. And so, Mark, maybe you've got another one in you. Like what?
For sure. Well,
what did we learn?
I would like
How
to say for sure,
it?
But yeah, I mean, for me, you really do learn so much through this journey. Prior to being an entrepreneur, I was kind of more in this corporate structure, and so you think you know a lot about things in that environment, but the reality is that this is a whole new world when you get into this marketplace. So, for me, I think one of the biggest early decisions you have to make, and you have to get as close to right as you can, is choosing your partners and your key advisors around you early on. I did I think a pretty good job. I got most of it right. I did make one or two that if I could go back and do it again, I would do it again differently. But, I think just finding the right people around you early on and to not box yourself in terms of operating agreements and voting rights and things like that, too early.
Right. So Carla and Jason have been in different startup programs that have come through the New Hampshire Tech Alliance over the years, and so we've heard a lot of stories over and over again. A couple that echo, I think, in waves or ripple over and over again is the wrong co-founder.
Yeah.
Right, and you're just taking the first person that is responsive and moving forward instead of understanding that it's a marriage that's not going to end, right? And that's pretty long for, or technically is a definite marriage, right? In Carla's case,
actually who you're married to.
But it's a very serious first step of that startup, and people will often try to be skipping ahead, right, to what they're really excited about, which is the product, right, and building the thing. And the other that I know I was always guilty of, also in the startups I've been involved with, is over-optimizing or over-analyzing all the cool new tech. Right? Like, well, all right, this database just came out, or is it this one? Well, I got to test on all 7 first.
Right.
I'm going to spend the next 2 years evaluating this thing before I build a line of code, right?
Yep.
And it's so easy to get drawn into that versus just getting out the door to talk to the customers who are so important.
It's even easier to do today than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because easy. Of how fast things have moved.
Yeah. And so Jason, how about you? Like, have you learned anything? Would we take a different approach?
I hope I learned something. I think looking back, there's a lot of things that I wish I could have done differently. I think the decisions that we made as a team based on the information we had, it would be hard to go back and make a different decision. Things that I have gotten, crazy wrong are the length of the sales cycle. I didn't have any socket to plug that into. I'd never in my career seen such a long sales cycle. And so that's something that I've just had to constantly keep trying to adapt to in terms of how we think strategically and also what we do tactically. And that's something that you only learn through experience. And it really, I think, highlights why robotics companies go out and raise $50, $100 million, because it takes a lot of money to make hardware, and it takes a lot of money to build those relationships over a long period of time. So I think anything that I could have done to try to understand better the little signs of things that maybe weren't going to pan out with a customer, or sometimes even just listen to that little twinge in my gut that says, probably not, But you just never know, which frog is going to turn into a prince, as my teammate Mike always used to say.
And it's so hard. It's so hard when you're talking to a customer to not take the hint, right? Some people we're just too nice. I really like you. I don't want to say no, but I'm never going to do business with you. So there's a maybe in there, and
it isn't even that. It's so much more insidious. The problem we have is that the people we talk to are so excited, and they're like, "I can't wait to write you a check," but they actually don't have the pen.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the people we're talking to have the decision-making responsibility, but their AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, are so new in the world that almost everybody you talk to is at the hypothetical stages in their own company. And so, we spend a lot of time educating customers and then giving them the information they need to go back and ask for funding, and they don't always get it. We're not necessarily just competing with other robotics companies. We're competing with, an HR program to analyze something, that's totally unrelated. But when it comes to allocating resources at the customer company, we have to do the best we can to educate them on what the ROI is, and hope they can convince the bosses.
I like that I appreciate you brought up the, thinking about competition. I talk to startups all the time, and it's so frequent you hear the line, "Oh, I don't have any competition," right? Which, of course, we're all laughing and nodding,
right?
Because if you think that, you just haven't really thought through that long. And
exactly.
And so, is there any kind of anecdotes about that sort of shocking discovery that anybody's gone through of, we thought our competition was this, but then we realized it was over here, or it was there were so many more players in the marketplace, or your competition discovered you, and what that meant?
Yeah, I can certainly answer that. Going into this, I knew that we had a competitor. It was mostly a legacy competitor. So for us, as the new shiny new toy, people tended to listen to the story, and they kind of saw fundamentally a different value proposition than they had historically seen. But as you get bigger and the marketplace evolves, then more competitors start to come in. And the other thing that we learned was not just a competitor standpoint, but our client base. There are companies coming to us for our data that we had never even anticipated before. And so you kind of think that you knew who your customer base was, but it was actually pivoting to many different industry segments that we hadn't necessarily thought about when we went into it.
Classic startup story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I want to jump in a little bit forward to sort of the here and now, right? We have a pandemic where we have done so many different things even to come in here today, right? In the processes and that we're going through to be healthy and to be safe and to protect our customers and our employees. And I think for me, the theme for 2020 is, resilience and flexibility, right? So how have you dealt with that in your businesses?
I don't. So.
Ongoing.
This probably says something about my life that I should work on. But my schedule has almost not changed. The way I live it in terms of, masks and keeping hands clean and that kind of thing has changed a lot. We went to what we think was probably the last trade show on Earth in March, and when we got home, everything just stopped. But we had a customer that we had to ship their order, and they're an e-commerce company. They shipped medical supplies to old folks in their home, and who could be more essential than that, especially back in March when they're just like, stay home, especially older folks. So we knew that as an essential business serving an essential business serving an essential customer, we just had to get it done. And so when we first got back, there was very little that was really understood about the way the virus spreads. And so what we did was we all just quarantined together and cranked that order out as well as a couple of others. And then once we kind of were able to look up, after that we shifted to just always wearing a mask, always being conscientious about staying apart. And here's where having a new facility as you're growing is nice, because when you move in, you're fewer people. And so we can spread out in a nice big facility. I sent a reminder to people a month or two ago saying, you've all done great, but don't forget, we don't get brownie points from the virus for being good. That's not how it works. It's still there. It still does what it does. All it cares about is moving and recreating. And so, I think the adjustments we've had to make have just been in the way we work and, the physical protocols. But when you build hardware, you have to be there.
Has that impacted your sales or your lead times or any potential new customers that weren't a significant customer segment before?
It's been a mixed blessing. We had a pipeline with some retail customers in it, and that just was, instantly gone. Right. We had customers who were essential businesses who were keeping the whole country alive, and they're like, we love this new product, we're ready to go. And we thought, okay, great, this is slam dunk. But they had other projects that they wanted to finish, and those companies were shut down. So it was like this third order cascading effect that we had to deal with. And then there were other customers who came in because of the pandemic. So, there was definitely a wave that rolled through the pipeline. And I think ultimately it's going to be good for the entire industry. I certainly would have been happy to have that growth in business any other way.
Sure.
But it is definitely disruptive and definitely challenging to manage funding and everything else.
Right. So Carla, how are you being resilient? How are we pivoting if we need to?
Yeah, we're pivoting a lot in a few different ways. We did open up our hiring pool, so we have people all over our country now, which kind of is an interesting mix because it's given a little more perspective. Whereas we were only in Exeter in the office, and that was it. So on some level, we're going to be remote forever in some ways, which is kind of cool. The other aspect is because, as I had mentioned earlier, we're so event-based, we've had to change to be completely digital. So one of the things that, and honestly, I feel like we're really doing it right now too, because I feel like this pushed us into a point where we needed to get anyway, and we can't just rely on the things that we were relying on forever. So it shook us up in a good way, but really building a community and telling our story in a way that's meaningful to the entire ecosystem of not just Salesforce, but also other CRMs like HubSpot. We can branch out, and because of how we built our technology to be scalable and to be adaptable, we can just go into so many new places, and it's been really awesome and challenging. And because of the rate which we can iterate, we have also been able to ship things like individual apps that do one thing that we can give away for free. So whereas before we were bootstrapped and we relied heavily on customer, like long cycles, kind of a very similar story to that. Now we're like, you know what? People don't have budgets. Everything's getting pushed. So why don't we just really focus on being a generous brand and helping people during this time? So what can we do to help other people? Because people's data right now, as I'm sure you know, is the most important thing. They're living and dying by this, and people can't be together. They have to have that window. So we've really leaned into creating things of value for our community that we can just give to them. And it's been wonderful. Like, it's kind of helped us reevaluate those onboarding cycles. And when you can develop something that you can say, hey, we're not just going to build it for you, but we're going to invite you in to use this. We're going to invite you in to build this yourself and empower you guys, then that's a really cool place to be. So it was a grind. It wasn't easy. This may sound easy, but it's not. It was a very challenging, many sleepless nights and weekends to kind of pivot our really, honestly, it's like a whole new go-to-market, right? But it's been so fulfilling and rewarding, and getting to kind of create a gravity around us is pretty cool.
I know.
I was going to say, it's a great point. Like back in, I don't know, March or April, when Google and Apple started collaborating for the automated contact tracing, there was a project called PACT, and we jumped into the middle of that. There needed to be testing of how Bluetooth devices interacted with each other. And ideally what you'd want to do is everybody walk around with your phones and get closer and further. And obviously that was exactly the wrong thing to do, right? Yeah. So we worked with MIT Lincoln Labs and Northeastern and a couple of other organizations, part of a much larger organization, to gather that basic data with those groups that they could then take and model and try to feed that into the apps that would hopefully do automatic contact tracing. So, and it was something like I just decided I was going to slice off a piece of my time and do it myself, which was basically kind of, middle of the night stuff.
Yeah.
And it felt good to do something, to try to help everybody move forward.
In a really trying time, our bucket drains, right? And it's great to do something that's filling that bucket back up, and it recharges us so we can help others and our employees and everything else. Yeah. Mark, how are we doing with resiliency and flexibility?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting moment in time to really assess your revenue model as an example, right? Because for us, we had a recurring revenue SaaS-based model, super high retention. And so thank God for that revenue model, right? Because we were able to sustain not only really very consistent revenue streams through this, so we could protect not only the product, but our employees as well. But we also were, as you said, data is so important in everybody's business. And frankly, in a dispersed employee base, it becomes even more to be able to see and to track and to do those kinds of things. So we've actually been very resilient in this marketplace. I think the advice I would give to future aspiring entrepreneurs is in addition to all of the foundational things, but also the understanding the revenue models and things like that. Understand that your clients and your customer and your prospects are all going through different challenges, and be empathetic. And as you say, try and be helpful to them. Don't necessarily force down the sale at times of challenge. Help them rise up and through this process, and you'll have customers for the rest of your life.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we were all chatting earlier before the program began, and a lot of it had to do with our love of New Hampshire and innovation. And right, there's a reason why we're up on stage, because we dig this sort of stuff, right? And New Hampshire's got to come back on the other side of this economy and bloom again. right? We were doing real well till not too long ago, and we're trying really hard. So let's talk about a resilient New Hampshire economy, and that needs entrepreneurship, right? There's new businesses that have to take the place of the ones that couldn't survive. How can we encourage that in New Hampshire? How can we encourage both that entrepreneurship and that innovation? Who wants to dive into that one? Who's got all the answers?
Well, I guess I'll start. 'Cause I kind of, we founded miEdge back in 2012, and so the prior recession was kind of a little bit, in our memories at the time. So I think, New Hampshire fortunately has many great things going for it, particularly things like the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. And all of the incredible people that it has access to, and I would always encourage anybody that wants my advice for whatever reason, reach out, and I think all of us up here would be willing to help any entrepreneur. And I think that, a guy by the name of Jeremy Hitcher, you probably know who he is, the former Dine founder, one of these, an example of how incredible New Hampshire is that very early on in my startup career, Jeremy was busy as anything running Dine, but came to my office and spent time helping me and building me up and helping to kind of give me advice from somebody that really didn't need to, right? But they did, and I think that's a big part of what New Hampshire can do is to help rise these entrepreneurs up, and that all comes through the Tech Alliance.
It's such a great story, and it's one that we hear echo all the time, that we're a small state, and there's a lot of really nice, helpful, friendly people that want to help.
Absolutely.
And there's not 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon here. It's just 1 degree, 2 degrees away from anybody in New Hampshire, and I love hearing that story, and I imagine we have similar stories here too.
I was part of what I was thinking about when you mentioned, things closing. Sometimes in these struggle moments, it gives you time for reflection. And I think there are a lot of people in the world right now reflecting, specifically, in our area. So I think if you've been wanting to get into something, now is such a natural transition time. And Mark's right, like the help here is phenomenal. Everyone's so open, and that's one of the reasons we love and plan to stay in New Hampshire, is because this community is so supportive, and we all want to see each other succeed. So I would say for anyone listening that's been maybe wanting to try something new or take a risk there, now's the time to do it. We're all wanting to connect, and we can do that digitally. So absolutely reach out. And I think we're going to see a lot of really amazing things coming out the other side, for sure.
Entrepreneurship is about solving problems.
Yeah,
and holy cow, there's been a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of problems surrounding other areas that we weren't paying a lot of attention to, right? Telemedicine, schools, remote, all these other tangential things where people are really trying to innovate right now. Yeah. And Jason, closing thoughts for how to support innovation and entrepreneurship in New Hampshire.
I spend so much time thinking about all of the great things that are already here in New Hampshire. When we were starting up, of course, your Alpha Loft was a great resource, and many of these things have gotten coalesced into the Tech Alliance, and it's I'm so grateful and so aware of the resources that are here. That honestly, I don't have a list of things I wish I had, because there is funding, and there's not just funding. There's a system in place to funnel people who are interested towards the funding and funnel the funding towards those people. And it's as good as I've seen anywhere. But the accessibility of those people is fantastic. And that I don't have an answer for that, other than to say thanks for what everybody's already done.
Great. Well, that was a great closing commercial for the New Hampshire Tech Alliance. So thank you for that. And to follow that up, I really appreciate how we kind of, and totally organically, naturally ended on this point, because I should really do a shout out to everyone right now who's listening to this that has that idea in their head. You're working for corporate America. Maybe you've been laid off. Maybe you've been working from home, but you have a new concept and you want to get something done and solve a problem. There are a lot of resources out there. And so the first thing I'll tell you to do is visit the New Hampshire Tech Alliance website. Find me. I'm Joshua Sear. Send me an email. Let me know what you're working on. Let me know how I can help. Sign up for our newsletter. We have a lot of programs coming up in 2021, including Startup Fundamentals, which is a program specifically made for idea stage companies and concepts to help at the various earliest parts. It's a boot camp for that. And so please let us know. And then, talk to others. You can't live in a vacuum and solve a problem. You have to talk to others, including your potential customers. So get out there and start having those amazing conversations. I just want to say thank you, Jason, Carla, Mark. Thank you so much for your time today.
It's our pleasure.
This has been really a pleasure, and I think this is going to help a lot of people. So thanks again.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.